Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. Today we're going to be answering even more questions about the Harry Potter series that a lot of people probably don't know the answers to. From little tidbits to what may seem like major oversights, this video will cover them all. This is of course part 3 of the series, so be sure to check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't already, link in the description. I'm going to cover 5 today, and if you like this series, then I'll keep making more. Just let me know in the comments. Anyway, let's dive into it. How many students are there at Hogwarts? In an interview in October 2000, Rowling was asked, how many students attend Hogwarts and how many students are there in each house? To which Rowling replied with a very to the point, there are about 1,000 students at Hogwarts. And while that would give us a nice sum to work with, 250 students per house, unfortunately, I don't think that this figure makes much sense. In both the books and films, there is nothing that appears to indicate such a large number of students, and this number would heavily conflict with the world that we've been introduced to. Hogwarts students attend the school for 7 years, which means that, based on the figure of 1,000 students total, there would be approximately 36 new students from each house per year. If there are an equal number of boys and girls, that would mean that 144 students, 72 boys and 72 girls, start at Hogwarts each and every year. But this figure seems incredibly high. A more widely recognized figure, or at least a more widely fan-appreciated figure, is that there are 280 students at the school total. That's 70 students from each house and 10 new students per house per year, which would make a lot more sense and align much more closely with the books. One argument that could be made is that the Hogwarts attendance level in the books is a reflection of the casualties the Wizarding World faced during the First Wizarding War. Britain was not a good place to be during the rise of Voldemort, and an even worse place to raise a child, so it's entirely possible that large portions of Britain's wizarding population simply fled the country. However, the issue with this explanation is that by the time Harry arrived at school, there should have been evidence of a baby boom. A baby boom, in the context of war, refers to a significant increase in the birth rate that occurs after a period of conflict. As Harry's birth almost directly coincided with Voldemort's death and the end of the war, Harry's second and third years at Hogwarts should have been representative of this massive insurgence of new students. But they weren't. What was with Aberforth, Dumbledore and Goats? Arguably one of the Harry Potter story's best-kept secrets is what happened with Aberforth, Dumbledore and Goats. On 2 occasions, Albus Dumbledore comments on this. My own brother, Aberforth, was prosecuted for practicing inappropriate charms on a goat. It was all over the papers, but did Aberforth hide? No, he did not. He held his head high and went about his business as usual. Of course, I'm not entirely sure he can read, so that may not have been bravery. Dumbledore also briefly mentions his brother's unhealthy obsession with goats in his notes in his copy of Tales of Beedle the Bard. I heard it first from my mother, and it soon became the tale I requested more often than any other at bedtime. This frequently led to arguments with my younger brother, Aberforth, whose favourite story was Grumble the Grubby Goat. So what's the deal? How did he end up being prosecuted? In an interview, J.K. Rowling addresses this. In the Goblet of Fire, Dumbledore said his brother was prosecuted for practicing inappropriate charms on a goat. What were the inappropriate charms he was practicing on that goat? I think that he was trying to make a goat that was easy to keep clean, curly horns. That's a joke that works on a couple of levels. I really like Aberforth and his goats. But you know, Aberforth having this strange fondness for goats, if you've read book 7, came in really useful to Harry later on, because a goat, a stag, you know, if you're a stupid Death Eater, what's the difference? So that is my answer to you. Rowling was also asked a similar question in a fan letter. Why is one brother in love with goats? This question made me roar with laughter. Aberforth's goat fetish is a running joke that kept me amused. I don't think he's really in love with them, but it's a good pretext for humour. In conclusion, while many may have taken Aberforth's obsession to a much more inappropriate place, I think that the truth is he was just a really odd guy with a strong love for goats. After all, he used to go and feed them with his now deceased sister, so perhaps it's those fond childhood memories that cemented his connection to them, reminding him of a time when the family was much more put together. Who was George Weasley's Yule Ball date? We know that both George and Fred attended the Yule Ball in the Goblet of Fire. However, one relatively obscure question that has always been the mind of more devout Harry Potter fans is, who did George actually take to the ball? It's well known that Fred ended up taking fellow Gryffindor Angelina Johnson, as this is well documented in the books. It's also well known that George ends up marrying Angelina himself. Weird. But strangely, Fred's date is never revealed. In the films, he's seen dancing with an actress named Mala Sumebi, but as far as I can tell, she isn't explicitly linked with any known Harry Potter characters. And the likelihood that George didn't have a date seems highly improbable. Therefore, I suspect that the strongest contenders are as follows. Alicia Spinnet. A Gryffindor chaser and Angelina's close friend, Alicia was one of George's peers. While there's no record of Alicia and George interacting, it's likely that they had a friendly relationship. Notably, during Fred's public invitation to Angelina for the Yule Ball, Alicia and George were standing nearby. However, George didn't ask Alicia to the ball, which could mean that they had already agreed to go together. One of them was unavailable, or George wasn't interested in asking her. Katie Bell. This Gryffindor chaser, who was 1 year younger than George, is also not specifically mentioned as having a date to the Yule Ball. Though she isn't featured much in that book, fan fiction often pairs her romantically with Oliver Wood, who wasn't at Hogwarts at the time. If George wasn't going with Angelina, I think it's likely that Katie was his date. Beyond these two, I think that any other names would lack any real evidence or connection to George. If you've got a better guess, let me know. Why are the Hogwarts house mascots not magical animals? The cornerstones of the Hogwarts house system, and perhaps the most iconic symbols associated with each house, are the house mascots. For Gryffindor, this mascot was a lion. For Slytherin, a serpent. For Hufflepuff, a badger. And for Ravenclaw, an eagle, or raven in the films. Gryffindor's mascot, the lion, symbolizes bravery and chivalry, key traits of the house as described by the Sorting Hat. Representing royalty, strength, and justice, the lion aligns perfectly with Gryffindor's values. Slytherin's mascot, the serpent, embodies the house's defining traits of ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness. As the Sorting Hat suggests, Slytherins are willing to use any means to achieve their goals, often using manipulation or other clever strategies. In nature, snakes exhibit these qualities through their ability to outwit prey and adapt to their surroundings. Hufflepuff's mascot, the badger, reflects the house's core traits: loyalty, patience, and a quiet but steadfast bravery. As the Sorting Hat describes, Hufflepuffs are just and unafraid of hard work, mirroring the badger's reserved yet fiercely protective nature. Ravenclaw's mascot, which is often misrepresented as a raven, is actually an eagle, a symbol of intelligence, strength, and high spirit. The house values wit and wisdom, reflected in both the Sorting Hat's description and the student motto. Our emblem is the eagle, which soars where others cannot climb. Bearing all of this in mind, it feels like these creatures were actually quite well chosen to represent the four houses. However, I've always found it a little odd that, in a world rife with magical creatures, Muggle animals were chosen to act as symbols for a magical school, especially when Ilvermorny chose to embrace magical creatures like Thunderbirds, Wampus Cats, Horned Serpents, and Puckwudgies for its house names. So, what's the deal? In truth, there is no big, scandalous explanation for why magical creatures weren't used. They just weren't necessary. They could have chosen more impressive creatures like dragons, phoenixes, etc., sure, but the choices made by the original four founders of Hogwarts were made for a reason. We also have to remember that Hogwarts was founded before the International Statute of Secrecy had been put in place, meaning that Muggles and magic folk coexisted. During this time, due to exposure to the Muggle world, these Muggle creatures could have become near and dear to the founders. And one last theory to close off this question, since this is Harry Potter theory, is that the animals associated with each house were representative of the Hogwarts founders' Patronus animals. Maybe they are even more significant than we realize. Which brings me to, what is Draco Malfoy's Patronus? By the end of the books, a large number of Hogwarts students were able to successfully produce a Patronus charm. This was in large part due to Harry's private lessons with his fellow Dumbledore's army members. And in wizarding society as a whole, the ability to produce a full corporeal Patronus was considered the mark of a powerful witch or wizard. The Patronus charm is difficult, and many witches and wizards are unable to produce a full corporeal Patronus, a guardian which generally takes the shape of the animal with whom they share the deepest affinity. But with the series ending, we still didn't find out if certain witches or wizards were ever able to produce one, namely Draco Malfoy. In an interview, Rowling has since answered this question. As of the end of Half-Blood Prince, he has no idea how to produce one, so nobody knows. You must remember that the ability to produce a Patronus demonstrates an advanced level of magic not routinely taught to young Hogwarts students, hence the surprise of the prospective members of Dumbledore's army when they find out that Harry can make a Patronus. However, in a separate interview, she also mentioned that Snape was the only Death Eater who could produce one. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that Draco never made it happen. Some fans have argued that this may be in part due to the fact that Draco couldn't muster the necessary happy memories, but I don't quite agree with that one. Draco undoubtedly had a hard childhood, but there were certainly some glimmers of light in there. And on that note, that's it for today's video. Stay tuned for part 4 of this series and be sure to check out parts 1 and 2 if you haven't already. Also be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.